The dining room, usually a setting for Sunday peace and shared harvest, goes silent the moment Elias, the 78-year-old patriarch, opens the heavy cream-colored envelope. The silence is not merely an absence of noise. It is a pressurized vacuum, a pause pregnant with the impending rupture of 50 years of family hierarchy. Elias does not erupt in the expected way. He does not yell the defensive, emotionally charged retort that his children are clearly anticipating. He does not plead for understanding or mercy. He does not even allow his gaze to linger on his oldest son, Mark, the architect of this confrontation, the one who just issued the unilateral final demand that Elias vacate the home he painstakingly built and owned for 5 decades. Instead, his movements are deliberate, weighted with a slow, procedural dignity. He extracts a single, thick sheet of paper, the precise, certified copy of the property deed, and lays it flat on the highly polished mahogany surface of the dining table. The contrast between the furious heat of the demand and the cold, unyielding formality of the document is startling. The gesture itself is minimal, requiring no more than 2 seconds and a slight flick of the wrist. Yet, the shift in power dynamics it catalyzes is utterly monumental. The entire sequence is a masterclass in controlled confrontation, distilled into 3 calm steps, producing one undeniably loud result. Documentation replacing defensiveness, dignity conquering condescension, and finality ending the argument. This, fundamentally, is the potent power derived from the strategic transmutation of internal panic into external, undeniable proof. This is the blueprint for how we effectively neutralize the insidious threat of ageism and institutional minimization, not through the primal scream of outrage, but through the rigorous deployment of paperwork, the surgical precision of language, and the unwavering citation of governing policy. We are frequently conditioned by societal narratives and personal instinct to believe that when authority, whether familial, corporate, or institutional, is unjustly questioned, the only viable response is to fight loud. We mistakenly assume that righteous rage is the necessary weapon. This is a profound error. Rage is not a tool. It is merely heat. Heat, by its very nature, consumes vital energy, clouds judgment, and obscures the clear facts required for victory. It provides the aggressor with the very ammunition they seek, evidence of emotional instability or irrationality, the superior instrument for achieving justice, especially for those marginalized by age, is cold. It is utterly devoid of personal emotion, yet saturated with structural power. It is the documented policy number, saved in a secure file, the time-stamped text message confirming a broken agreement, or, in the most compelling instances, the undisputed deed laid flat upon a table, seized by hostility. The coldness ensures that the argument remains confined to the legal and procedural domain, where the marginalized often possess an unassailable advantage if they are prepared. For the last 10 years, my work has been dedicated to documenting the complex and often devastating ways in which older adults are systematically marginalized, minimized, and managed against their will by those who presume control. I have witnessed the erosion of autonomy caused by the dismissive, undermining pronouncement, "You don't truly understand the modern world." I have seen professional institutions and intimate family structures alike make the disastrous mistake of confusing maturity and accumulated wisdom with generalized incompetence. This bias is not benign. It is a direct assault on the right to self-determination. But in equal measure, I have chronicled the moment of profound reversal. I have seen the day the power structure snaps, when the narrative imposed by the aggressor is shattered by the simple weight of objective reality. This moment occurs when the individual, utterly exhausted by the relentless stream of excuses, the patronizing tone, and the presumption of deficiency, calmly reaches into a briefcase or pocket and produces the single, decisive instrument that instantaneously cancels the entire narrative of abuse, the definitive proof that voids the perpetrator's excuse. Der Pritzidor, the day the deed spoke, Elias's stand. This precise reversal was embodied by Elias T. Vance, 78 years old, a former professional builder whose hands had shaped the very landscape of his community, now retired but relentlessly engaged with his world. The annual family planning meeting, hosted in the vast historic home he constructed brick by brick in the 1970s, was the chosen battlefield. The setup was heartbreakingly classic, familiar to countless families, grappling with aging parents and shifting financial expectations. Elias's physical health required careful management, but his cognitive capacities, his ability to reason, analyze, and manage complex financial affairs remained unimpaired, a fact his children chose conveniently to overlook. His two adult children, Mark and his younger sister, driven by an insidious combination of legitimate, though highly exaggerated concern for his future welfare and a more potent, deeply ingrained desire to consolidate substantial future assets, had reached a consensus. The time, they announced, had come for him to downsize. The narrative was skillfully packaged as altruism. We are saving you the effort of maintenance. We are protecting your substantial capital from unnecessary taxation and market risk. The framing was always about help, but the underlying tone was pure, undisguised authority. The conversation commenced with thinly veiled, patronizing agreement, the kind that invalidates experience. Yes, Dad, that's a nice idea you had, but we are the designated adults running things now. It built slowly, escalating through uncomfortable glances and coordinated maneuvers, culminating in the sudden, sharp demand from Mark, supported by the silent, confirming nod of his sister. We have thoroughly reviewed the local market trends, Dad. It is a seller's opportunity. You need to prepare to move out by the end of this quarter. We have already initiated talks with a listing agent on your behalf. The atmosphere in the expansive dining room became instantly heavy, suffocatingly dense. The clinking of coffee spoons against porcelain ceased abruptly. This was not a tentative request for consideration. It was an unequivocal expulsion order. It was a bald, cynical seizure of executive authority, rooted entirely in the systemic bias that old age automatically signifies an irreversible forfeiture of decision-making rights. The unspoken subtext was clear. You are old, therefore, you are disposable. Elias felt the immediate visceral tremor of panic, the cold sensation rising from his gut, the quick defensive retort, the instinctual, passionate urge to shout, "How dare you? This is my house, I built it," lumped painfully in his throat. This is precisely the common, fatal mistake that the marginalized make under pressure. When you shout, when you allow emotion to breach your defenses, they immediately catalog it as confirmation of emotional instability, neatly validating their pre-existing narrative that you are unfit, erratic, and therefore incapable of managing your own affairs. But Elias had anticipated this moment. He had meticulously prepared, not for a chaotic family squabble, but for a formal adversarial hearing. He had dedicated the entirety of the preceding week to executing a quiet, focused process designed to convert subjective anxiety into objective, unassailable fact. He swapped panic for proof, thereby drastically increasing his strategic power. His first action, honed through practice, was the initial step of the justice preparation ritual. Focused, centered breathing, paired with an uncompromisingly strong posture. He adjusted his focus, deliberately shifting it away from the painful churning in his gut, the site of emotional reactivity, and directed it solely toward the facts, meticulously saved and organized within the Notes application on his smartphone. He finally met Mark's gaze directly, his eyes clear and steady. Crucially, his voice, when it came, was measured, low, and entirely devoid of any identifiable emotional inflection. No anger, no surprise, no sadness. He did not waste energy saying, "You can't do that," or "That is unreasonable." Such a statement validates the underlying premise that they might possess the authority to execute the action, thereby forcing him into a defensive posture. Instead, Elias deployed the single, perfectly calibrated sentence engineered to stop the entire table, forcing the conflict to exit the emotional arena and enter the procedural one. Mark, I require you to show me the specific executed clause, referenced by section, and subclause number within the existing Vance Family Trust or related asset management agreement that legally grants you the unilateral authority to initiate the liquidation, transfer, or sale of this primary residential asset. The effect was instantaneous. Silence descended again, but this time it was the shocked silence of procedural uncertainty. Mark's expression shifted visibly, transforming from an assumption of confident dominance to genuine confusion, his brow furrowing as he scrambled to locate the assumed basis for his power. He stammered, weakly attempting to revert to the familiar narrative. Dad, it's just common sense. We are the family, and we're trying to do what is best for everyone. Best is a subjective, conversational concept, Mark. Elias calmly countered, leaning slightly forward. Authority is a documented, codified concept. You must provide a citation. Which specific policy number, which numbered section of the governing instrument are you relying on to justify this action? This is the precise point where the cold, indifferent weight of established policy effortlessly beats the hot, fragile weight of personal ego. When you demand a citation, when you force the aggressor to transition from vague assumption into the structural realm of legal accountability, they are immediately confronted with the stark reality. They are operating on the self-serving bias of assumption, not the unyielding force of law. It was then that Elias performed the quiet, decisive gesture that recalibrated the gravitational center of the room. He reached into his leather briefcase, not hurriedly, but with a sense of ceremony, and retrieved the heavy, cream-colored envelope. He extracted 2 critical documents. The first was the deed, a flawless, certified copy, unambiguously showing his name, Elias T. Vance, as the sole, unencumbered owner, held clearly in fee simple. The second was the comprehensive, original declaration of trust for the family's assets, the very management agreement his children were so arrogantly referencing. Elias held the documents, allowing their structural presence to speak volumes before he did. He looked first at Mark, then ensured his gaze swept over every assembled family member, guaranteeing that all eyes were fixed on the relevant text. He placed his finger directly upon a specific paragraph within the trust document. Article 3, Section 4, Subclause B, Elias stated, his voice resonating with an authority that had been notably absent just 5 minutes earlier, now returned fully armed. The very clause you repeatedly referenced this morning, Mark, the one you seem to believe grants the advisory trustees, my children, absolute control over asset management, only grants advisory rights for investments held outside of the primary residential property. The language of the trust explicitly, and I mean explicitly, excludes the transfer or sale of 1440 Heritage Drive, unless 2 narrowly defined conditions are met. A. Documented, judicially adjudicated medical necessity confirming incapacitation, or B. Explicit written consent provided by the sole title holder. He lifted the heavy deed, letting it fall back to the table with a soft thud. I am unequivocally the sole title holder, and my medical files, recently updated, definitively confirm that I am not incapacitated. Therefore, this entire discussion regarding the listing of this house for sale, or any form of coercive transfer, is legally concluded. The silence that followed was total, punitive. The sheer weight of the trust document, a document governing substantial, generational assets, demanding respect and dignity, settled like an oppressive shadow over the room. Mark instantly recognized the depth of his miscalculation. His entire position, his aggressive demeanor, and his assumed authority were revealed as nothing more than a deliberate, self-serving, and frankly unethical misreading of the governing rules. The outcome was immediate, severe, and entirely irreversible. The attempted power grab was exposed in harsh daylight as a profound abuse of presumed non-existent authority. Mark, mortified, visibly trapped, and professionally exposed, attempted one last, desperate, emotionally manipulative attack. "You are simply being difficult, Dad. This is exactly why we, the responsible parties, need to step in and make decisions for you." He sought to revert to the narrative of incompetence. This is the exact, critical juncture where the strategically positioned ally becomes invaluable. Elias had not only anticipated the legal rebuttal, but also this final, dismissive, emotionally charged swipe designed to undermine his character. He subtly glanced across the table at his daughter-in-law, Clara. Clara was his quietly designated observer, his documentarian, positioned strategically at the room's perimeter. Clara responded without uttering a single word. She simply lifted her smartphone, which had been recording the entire meeting from the start. A fact Elias had calmly stated aloud at the beginning, fully respecting state recording laws. She didn't have to speak a single phrase, but the tiny, subtle red dot reflecting the overhead light spoke volumes of undeniable evidence. Silence, documented and verified, becomes evidence of malice. Elias slowly, ceremoniously stood up, gathering the deed and the trust declaration, folding them carefully back into the heavy envelope. "The family meeting regarding asset transfer is definitively over," he announced, his voice regaining its full volume, now infused with the gravitas of legal sanction. "Mark, your aggressive and willfully incorrect interpretation of the governing trust instrument, clearly demonstrated today, represents a significant and actionable conflict of financial interest. Effective immediately, I am exercising the authority outlined in Article 6, Section 7 of this very trust, which legally allows the settlor, myself, to immediately replace any advisory trustee shown to harbor documented malice, professional negligence, or demonstrable financial conflict against the settlor's primary interests. I am formally requesting your immediate, non-negotiable resignation as my financial advisor and personal trustee, effective 9 a.m. tomorrow morning." This was far more than a simple act of dignity reclaimed. This was comprehensive, decisive justice administered by policy. Elias did not just successfully fend off the unprovoked attack. He surgically removed the persistent threat entirely from the infrastructure of his life. Competence is the ultimate defense strategy. The reason this profound reversal works, operating with such overwhelming efficacy, is because it deliberately leverages the power of structure and system, entirely bypassing the exhausting, subjective morass of emotional confrontation. Competence, the absolute knowledge of rules, boundaries, and documents, is the singular, ultimate, and unassailable defense against the pervasive, destructive bias that insists you are, by definition of age, incapable. When you are actively engaged in fighting ageism, whether the battle occurs within the bureaucratic confines of a hospital system, the rigid structure of a corporate environment, the petty governance of a condo association, or the sacred space of your own dining room, your operational mandate must be to know the precise rules better and cite them faster than the individuals who seek to minimize, control, and ultimately manage you. The entire fragile structure of institutional ageism relies almost exclusively on the expectation that its victims will feel perpetually overwhelmed, functionally isolated, and ultimately ignorant of the established internal procedures that govern their rights. The best tool in the arsenal of cold justice is not a microphone for shouting. It is a laser pointer directed at the rule number, the policy section, the exact wording. To prepare effectively, you must first meticulously identify the specific source of the hidden, assumed authority your aggressors are using against you. Every system, regardless of its size, relies on written governance. In the context of a condo association or homeowners association, they rely on the extensive bylaws, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, or the governing declaration. Your mandated response: demand to see the specific resolution number or article within the CC&Rs justifying the action. In a healthcare or acute medical setting, they operate under hospital policy, internal procedure manuals, or specific state regulatory laws. Your mandated response: require the immediate provision of the specific section number and wording within the Patient Bill of Rights or the hospital's official discharge policy. In a hostile family or trust environment, they manipulate the deed, the will, or the trust instrument itself. Your mandated response: do not argue. Simply produce and display the executed notarized document and point to the relevant exclusionary clause. In a professional workplace context, pre-retirement or termination, they will cite the Employee Handbook or arcane HR policy. Your mandated response: demand, in writing, a copy of the termination justification under the stated Section 4, Paragraph A, which must contain verifiable data, not subjective opinion. Your strategic imperative is always the same: demand the written authority. Force the argument into the text. The 10-minute justice prep ritual: arming your autonomy. Justice is never a matter of chance or accident. It is, by definition, the precise confluence of rigorous preparation meeting a tactical opportunity. Before you enter any high-stakes interaction, a formalized meeting, a clearly confrontational dialogue, a high-pressure phone call with a hostile administrator, or a challenging medical consultation, you must dedicate 10 focused minutes to center your physiological state and strategically weaponize your existing documentation. This ritual is designed to profoundly shift your posture and mindset from that of a potential victim to that of an unassailable authority. 1. Centered physiological breathing, 2 minutes. Retreat to a quiet, private space. Close your eyes tightly. Your exclusive focus must be entirely on the immediate physical sensation of your breath entering and exiting your body. On the exhale, consciously allow your shoulders to visibly drop, releasing physical tension. This is not casual meditation. It is critical physiological safety preparation. A steady, predictable pulse rate is non-negotiable for producing a steady, commanding voice. Calming the body controls the narrative. 2. Strong posture and voice check, 1 minute. Stand or sit with deliberately strong, centered posture. Physically drop the pitch of your voice by at least an octave lower than your usual speaking range. Lower vocal tones universally project greater gravity, competence, and professional confidence. Practice one perfectly neutral, assertive phrase. I require the name of the person in charge and a certified copy of the policy governing this specific matter. Note the immediate internal feeling of acquired leverage. 3. Open the proof file and log. 3 minutes. Access your phone's secure notes application or retrieve your physical organized folder. You cannot, under any circumstances, rely solely on memory under duress. Locate the precise policy number, the specific deed reference, or the exact clause you are prepared to cite. Simultaneously, write down the exact current time, the location, and the names of all parties present. This meticulous step creates your unassailable, real-time evidentiary log. 4. Confirm the ally and recording status. 2 minutes. Text your designated ally the precise pre-agreed code words or phrase you will deploy if the situation becomes dangerously escalated or hostile. If recording the conversation is legally permissible in your jurisdiction, always verify state law. Ensure your phone's recording shortcut is tested and the battery power is 100%. Check that the camera lens is perfectly clean. That subtle reflection catching the light, that is frequently the red recording light. Remember, Your quiet, meticulous documentation is the single biggest, most terrifying threat to the aggressor's sense of unearned entitlement. 5. Final anchor. Phrase commitment. 2 minutes. Choose the single, neutral, maximally assertive sentence you will deploy immediately upon the first challenge. For Elias, the phrase was, "Which policy number are you specifically citing?" Say it aloud, project it across the room mentally. Commit entirely to deploying this prepared phrase before allowing yourself to engage in any form of emotional rebuttal or defensive explanation. This focused 10-minute preparation ritual guarantees you 3 critical, non-negotiable benefits: physiological safety, absolute clarity of purpose, and overwhelming strategic leverage. You walk into the confrontation armed exclusively with verifiable facts, completely insulated from the debilitating effects of fear. The bias that cost the house and the narrative of precision. The insidious bias that metastasized and attempted to cost Elias his lifelong home is built upon the foundational, pervasive societal belief that older adults possess substantial, valuable assets, but simultaneously lack the requisite mental competence, acuity, or stability to manage them effectively. It is the insidious, ever-present narrative of the fading mind. We must make it our collective mission to shatter that destructive narrative by consistently demonstrating surgical, procedural precision. We are not, contrary to the stereotype, fragile, easily confused, or easily dismissed. We are meticulous, prepared, and fundamentally anchored by documentary proof. When Elias calmly laid the certified deed down on the mahogany table, he was doing far more than simply proving legal ownership. He was showcasing irrefutable, current competence. He knew the governing document structure intimately. He knew the articles. He understood the legal loopholes that protected him, and he had flawlessly executed the legal leverage he held. The inevitable consequence of his actions was decisive accountability. The cancellation of Mark's advisory and trustee role was the necessary systemic fix to remove the long-term threat. The public humiliation Mark experienced was the unavoidable professional apology for his attempted abuse, and the profound internal feeling of dignity permanently reclaimed was the ultimate personal justice achieved. We must respect the limits of confrontation, always prioritize physical safety above all else. Never, under any circumstance, allow a tense situation to escalate into a physical confrontation. If you feel even remotely at physical risk, immediately document the details and leave the premises, escalating the issue via formal legal or reliable social service channels. Always be aware that laws regarding the legality of recording conversations vary drastically by state and jurisdiction. Know your local rules and rigorously adapt your preparation. The ultimate enduring lesson derived from these successful reversals is that dignity is actively earned through strategic, prepared action, not passively demanded through emotional appeals. Your dignity, your sense of self-worth and autonomy, is inextricably tied directly to your demonstrated competence and your active control over the verifiable facts of your own life story. Today, you must take the first necessary step toward establishing that unassailable control. Your active challenge is simple, precise, and immediate. Choose one existing, high-stress scenario you are currently facing: an overreaching landlord, a domineering family member, an uncooperative service provider, or a hostile bureaucrat, and clearly identify the single, written source of their assumed authority. Then, you must find the written rule, the specific policy, the relevant deed, or the governing contract that legally governs that relationship. Save that exact specific policy number, the clause citation, or the section number into your phone's secure notes right now. Set a clear, accessible recording shortcut. Practice reciting one calm, assertive, non-emotional phrase until it feels automatic. Choose one dependable ally you can absolutely trust. not to fight the battle for you, but to witness and document the confrontation for you. Commit fully to performing the 10-minute justice prep ritual immediately before your next confrontation. Let the undeniable documentation speak with maximum force. Let your demonstrated dignity be infinitely louder than their persistent, minimizing bias.